Well, the role of agriculture has played in Nigeria's economy cannot be overemphasized. Concerned by the need to boost the sector, the federal government's relevant stakeholders, partners, and private institutions have so far been working tirelessly in promoting the role farmers play towards achieving sustainable food security. Now, despite various initiatives by the federal government to boost the agriculture sector, that sector grew at only 1.9% year-on-year in the third quarter of 2018, contributing just about 29% to the nation's GDP. Now, this is a new year. Which way forward? What is the outlook like? I'm being joined by an agricultural economist and a professor of agriculture at the Federal University of Agriculture at Abeokuta, Professor Bola Okuneye. Good morning, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Good morning.
Did you find it difficult getting here? The traffic was bad. Yeah.
I had to turn myself to a traffic manager.
Well, thank God you were able to make it.
Yeah.
Well, looking at the agricultural sector, it accounts for about 29% of the nation's GDP. Right. At least going by the third quarter of 2018. Yet it remains one of the most backward sector. How would you reconcile this?
Well, in the first place, the people that are really taking care of us in terms of agricultural raw material generation and food production, they are basically the small-scale farmers. They continue to struggle to maintain us to some level, despite the high level of importation of so many food items. And so when you now consider the fact that they were basically employed on agriculture, and they have a very large population, as much as about 65% in agriculture and agro-related areas, then maximizing them will still give higher level of GDP. But now it's just about 29%, which is not too bad. Because in some developed countries, we found out that agriculture is only noted for the production of food items and for some industrial raw materials. But the GDP growth is basically from the industry, which is also in Nigeria as well as in many developing countries.
Now, looking at that third quarter GDP number, the sector grew by 1.9%. That's quite minimal. And this is despite all the government initiatives, like we had the anchor borrowers, which a lot of people actually praise. But one would wonder what went wrong.
Well, it didn't really go down to the real farmers. Those people that are benefiting, they are basically the enlightened, the literate farmers. But the core production of agriculture comes from the illiterate ones, the real macro entrepreneurs, micro entrepreneurs, not even the small-scale producers. And so until when we are able to evolve strategies that will go down to these peasant or micro farmers, that's when the various policies of the government can assist the growth of agriculture.
What kind of strategy are you looking at? What kind of strategy do you think the government may probably have to employ to be able to reach out to these micro farmers that you're talking about?
Well, in the first place, the basic problems that they face are in terms of labor. We have a high level of rural-urban migration now. And so the youths are no longer so much available. And so there's need for technology to replace labor. And that means the issue of mechanization, either in a cooperative system or communal system, that will allow them to expand their farm produce. The issue of minimizing the conflicts between farmers and other categories of people. Two, giving them micro-level credit, microcredit. Credit is really a major problem to these micro farmers. So it's when credit is available to them. And so I was really praying that the trader money can also be extended to farmer money, even in kind, so that the farmers too can produce. And it's when they produce that they can get to the market. That's when the traders can really do the real thing that they want them to do, using the trader money.
All right, that brings us to the issue of the agricultural policies What do you think of it? Are we on the right track? Are there areas you think the government can actually make some amendment?
There are so many areas. The first one is that we should look at those policies that will assist the micro and small scale farmers, not the big time farmers, even though their role too is key. Because I also have in mind that even the various industries can also be encouraged to go into agriculture. They can link up with the various small-scale micro farmers to produce what they need in their various industries. That's one. Two, the issue of ease of CFO, certificate of occupancy, in order to get the land in place and then use it now to source for funds is very important. But we found out that there's only ease of CFO for those people building houses and not for farmers. Then the issue of as I mentioned earlier on, the issue of conflict between herdsmen and farmers, we need to solve this as quickly as possible. In the budget, I didn't really see anything being done in the area of cattle ranching. Government should really assist in this area so that it will minimize all those various problems. Then technology development, and that's where research and development become key. The universities, the research institutes need to be properly encouraged. If you look at the research fund of this country, it's as low as just 0.05% of the total budget. And we can't move forward without research and development. So it's when we come up with policies, when we come up with findings that these farmers can key into and then do some level of extension. That's when the farmers can uptake the various recommendations from the institutes and universities so that they can increase their level of productivity. Today, we know that rather than having about 7 tons per hectare for maize, we are still struggling with just 1.5, 1.3 tons per hectare. That's very low. And it's when we have real extension, the technology and the credit, and encouraging the various farmers, in particular the youths. That's when agriculture can then grow. And the issue of a 1.9% can be turned to as high as about 3.5, 4.5%. That should be the target for this year.
Now, look, from all you have said, what is your outlook for this year? Where do you see the sector?
Well, if the situation continues as that of last year, I foresee a possible decline in the GDP contribution of agriculture. But it seems some states, and particularly the federal government, have been trying its best to change this. So if they can really put it in place, not just talk, not just saying it, we'll do it, but if they can really practicalize it, encourage the communities, encourage the farmers, encourage the youths, encourage the essential people, I foresee that there will be high level of development of agriculture, and therefore food security will not really be a major problem.
Now, talking about food security, I know that for some time now, the federal government has been talking about the need for us to be sufficient, particularly in rice production, so much emphasis on rice. Now, how close are we to this self-sufficiency in rice?
Well, in the first place, about between 50 and 55% of Nigerians, they're not food secure. In the second place, the issue of rice is really a thing that's giving someone headache. It has been projected that we are going to be the second largest importer of rice in 2019, surprisingly, despite the various efforts by FADAMA and some other states.
Why is that so? Is it because of the smuggling? Or is it because the rice that is produced here, they seem to be more expensive than those?
Sure. They're more expensive. And it only means that the rice being imported, they're not really so nutritious as those being domestically produced here. But people, they're not bothered about level of nutrition now. Oh, just get your stomach filled up. And the porous borders are not even helping. Now, we need to break that jinx of the high cost of the domestic rice production. And the high cost emanates from, one, the issue of not having sufficient mills to really process all this. Two, the issue of even land. You know, the land that's good enough for rice is not so much. Maybe about 10, 11% of the total arable land. But currently we are cultivating just about 3-4% of those large areas. And so, except we further encourage the rice farmers, speak with the various rice farmers associations, ask for their problems, and the government will now partner with them. Where the government partnering with them in terms of the levels of assistance that they can give. Is it credit? Is it giving tax relief in terms of importation of the various mills? Is it extension and therefore encouraging more extension men to be in the various ministries? Is it in terms of a commodity exchange program that can encourage the farmers to continually produce? And what is key is the returns to investment. So a farmer, we want to know, if I should put in my 100 naira here, how much am I going to gain? If you go to the bank now, they say, oh, you have to pay about 30% as a lending rate. That's very high. And so government policy in terms of the fiscal policy, in terms of monetary policies, they are key towards minimizing rice importation.
Now, are other segments of agriculture getting same desired attention? We have like the poultry, yes, animal husbandry, fishery, yes, sure, and all of that. How much attention are all of these other segments of agriculture getting?
Well, invariably, the government is much more interested in those commodities that we are importing, that we have a high level of demand for. And so the issue of poultry has not really been so much looked into. And it is necessary to really look at this. The issue of tomato, for instance, the government really needs to look at this in terms of minimizing the wastages through value addition. If you look at some other exportable commodities like cocoa, rubber, granite, cotton, government also needs to look at this, but they need to prioritize. Firstly, what do we want? Is it food security we want, or generation of exchange earnings? I understand that the Federal Minister of Agriculture is trying to come up with ways of exporting yam. So we need to balance. Should we first of all be food secured, or should we increase our level of exchange earnings? Well,
Professor Kuneye, I think this is a conversation that should actually be continuous, and we'll continue
yes,
to talk about it. Thank you very much for your time.